On this episode of Edge of the Web.
One of the big mistakes that people frequently make with Radical Candor is they think the thing to do is to hang out in ruinous empathy for a while and build the relationship there and then move over. But the fact of the matter is that the seeds of trust get sown in Radical Candor.
Your weekly digital marketing trends with industry trend-setting guests. You're listening and watching Edge of the Web. Winners of Best Podcast from the Content Marketing Institute for 2017. Hear and see more at edgeofthewebradio.com. Now, alongside Tom Broadbeck, here's your host, Aaron Sparks.
Ho, ho, ho. Yeah, I can't pull off a Santa to save my life, can I?
Jolly music.
It is jolly music. We've got Kim Scott on the line there. How you doing, Kim?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. More than welcome.
Excited to be here.
Hey, we're broadcasting from Edge Media Studios, located in downtown Indianapolis, Indiana. Every week we bring you the latest trends in digital marketing and marketing influencers. Check out our recent shows at edgeofthewebradio.com, as well as, check us out on all the different social platforms. But we're powered by Site Strategics, your digital marketing pioneers, specializing in the agile digital marketing practice, strategies and practice. If you're interested in what agile marketing is, it's the iterative approach towards marketing and execution. Go check us out over at sitestrategics.com. Inquire. Actually, you can download the Agile PDF free of charge. Of course, we'd never charge you something that glorious. Go down and download all the different tactics and find out why we do the Agile marketing approach here at Site Strategics. And by the way, I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Aaron Sparks, CEO of Site Strategics, as well as Edge Media Studios. The reason we do this show is a very important reason, a couple, maybe three. We certainly like to focus on what the best tactics are in digital marketing, different areas in the knowledge industry that this country and the world is in. We want to unpack and demystify a lot of tactics. There's so many tactics in the digital marketing space, but we also reach out to some top-line influencers that are breaking old dogma, old molds of how to do business, how to engage with audiences, as well as how to manage in internal employees and the like. So we talk to entrepreneurs and business leaders on a regular basis. To my left is Thomas Broadbeck, Director of Digital Media.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
So I sound a little deeper today, a little Barry Whitish.
Are you sick?
Got a little frog in my throat, I think, but we'll make it.
You got a bit of a smoothness.
I got my throat lozenges. I got some water. I am good to go.
Well, I'm sorry that you're all. Yeah.
So if you hear a random cough in the background, it's just me.
We'll fix it in post.
I will not do it into the microphone.
Let's introduce our guest again, Kim Scott. She's the author of the New York Times best-selling book, Radical Candor. Kim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Really thrilled to be here.
Fantastic.
Eager to talk Radical Candor with you.
So we're going to talk radically today, huh?
Yeah.
We're going to be radical, and we're going to be candid.
There we go.
We're going to show each other that we care.
Okay. Challenge accepted.
And we'll challenge directly, too.
Absolutely. And potentially be obnoxiously aggressive. Who knows? Hey, to be aggressive to our audience, please check us out over at all of the audio platforms where our podcast is regularly distributed. That's iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartMedia, TuneIn, SoundCloud, Spreaker, as well as Acast, and now Spotify. So we're there, and we're kicking it with some big guys.
Yeah, I was just looking at stats the other day. Stats look great. I was kind of surprised. So
sweet.
Yeah, keep it up.
Love it. Thanks so much for all of our audiences, wherever you are. We certainly implore you to jump onto the live Facebook broadcast that we do each and every show, so we can have your comments jumping in there and talking to us, because, hey, that's part of what this Edgecast is all about, is not only bringing everybody to the table, but also listening to our audience regularly. So before anything else, let's jump into some latest digital marketing news. How about that?
Put that cookie down now!
This week's trending topics.
All right, Kim, we're gonna bring you alongside on some insights you may have, because we are talking about some big companies that you very well may know. On Search Engine Roundtable, Google extends search results snippets to the maximum 320 characters from Barry Schwartz. Tom, what's all this about?
So Twitter announced, right, they went from 140 to 280. They doubled their character limit. And so Google just said, hold my beer. We can do it too. and they decided to double their meta descriptions. I was going to do, Andy, get your gun. Anything you can do, I can do better. But I went with
I dig it. You know your audience, don't you?
I do. So basically, the article here says Google's officially extended their search result snippets to a maximum character length of 320 characters. They said, we recently made a change to provide more descriptive and useful snippets to help people better understand how pages are relevant to their searches. This resulted in snippets becoming slightly longer on average. So if you didn't know what a snippet is, it's just a meta description that appears below the clickable URL in the search result there. So those used to be around 156 to 165, right, depending. And there was I think even a pixel length for that as well. So it's kind of around that 156, 165 character limit. And that's now up to upwards of 320 characters allowed.
A heck of a lot more marketing to go in that.
Yes, yeah. There was a great Whiteboard Friday that Rand Fishkin did, and he brought up 3 points here that I just wanted to bring up here.
Yep.
He said this new thing, this new character limit will change how marketers will write and optimize their meta descriptions. It could impact click-through rates because people won't click through to the article because their answer will probably could appear there in the search result. He said it could be fewer for less complex queries, but it could be more clicks for complex queries because people want to learn more information about that. And it could also result in lower click-through rates for those listings that are listed lower, like the 7, 8, 9, 10, because they'll be just pushed further and further down the page.
Yeah. So they're radically changing our landscape. Kim, what do you think about this?
You know, I think I defer to Google on these decisions. I'll tell you what, I decided after 6 years at Google that what I really cared about was not click-through rate or cost per click, but was the management stuff that we're going to talk about. So there's a lot of people.
Kim, way to completely push away from the table.
How about that?
Well done. No, it is going to be a serious landscape challenge because as marketers, I mean, those are the persuasion points that we worked with. Not only the URL, but also what the transaction is intended to that audience. And now you got a heck of a lot more
so how much do you give up in that meta description now to get that click?
What's the balance there?
Yeah.
Because,
I don't know. Huh. I think it could kind of be a play towards the Google Home.
Yeah.
Because I think they're kind of pulling the featured snippets there.
Yep.
But if for some of their other queries where they don't know the answer for, they can start pulling for meta descriptions now. Another thing they said don't go and start rewriting all your meta descriptions, which I think is not the best advice. If you have a chance to control your own brand, go ahead and do it.
Right.
So in that Whiteboard Friday, Rand Fishkin mentioned that go to see your top landing pages in organic and do those first and then kind of start doing the rest. But yep.
Wow. That's big. That's big on the SEO front.
That's big.
From Search Engine Journal, from Matt Southern, Google Assistant can now find local home services. So Google Assistant is actually now capable of helping people find local home services that are relevant to their needs. Start off with a command such as, OK, Google, find me a plumber. The assistant will then further qualify you by asking what exactly you need help with. Okay, here it is. There's even more because it's actually diagnosing the problem now.
Yeah.
After being more specific, like saying you need to unclog a drain, the assistant will then ask if it's for the address listed on your Google account.
Yeah.
And then once that's determined, go through and actually offer to call the plumber immediately.
Yeah. Jim, if you pull that article back up there and scroll down, there's a GIF that kind of walks through how it will look like on the phone. And I assume it'll kind of be the same thing with the Google Home devices. So here it's asking, how can I help? The person's asked, I need a plumber. Then it's asking to further clarify what you need. It says my drain is clogged. And then ask for your address. And then give me a list.
Got it.
And there's a list right there. And even underneath there's rating certification. So that one says like Home Advisor certified. That one says Google certified. And then press the call. So all the more reason to get your Google local page or your Google My Business or whatever it's called now.
Yep.
Get that verified for your local business. And because, we even had John Mueller on a couple weeks ago. And he said, pretend you should start marketing like without screens.
Right.
If there weren't screens, how would people find your business? So
Absolutely. And
this is
Google
the next
Home is
step.
right there at the center of it as well. I think Kim, thoughts regarding the local assistant, and because for our listeners, just to give a little bit of bio, Kim worked for a number of years in Google, especially in the AdSense department. You saw so much innovation there. Did you hear some of the harbingers of the local pursuit when you were working with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I was there 2006 to 2010, so a long time ago now. But working on AdSense, YouTube, and DoubleClick. And there was a lot of interest in figuring out how we could get people what they needed right away and in a way that was actually genuinely helpful and fast. One of the things I loved about working at Google is it's efficiency obsessed. And I found working at Google, I saved a huge amount of time, both in my work life and in my personal life, because of this obsession with how can we get the cruft out of life done faster so that we can focus on the stuff that's really interesting. So hopefully this will help us get those plumbers faster. It is incredibly difficult to find a plumber.
Yeah,
It is.
a good plumber. A good
one.
plumber.
Yeah, one you want in your house.
You're absolutely right, and it's fantastic to be able to hear from individuals that worked inside the Googleplex, because it's just rampant with stories like this. Now let's switch gears over to marketing land from Tim Peterson. Facebook Local is the social network's stab at Yelp and Foursquare. So Tom, tell us about this particular story.
Yeah, so the Facebook events thing is kind of going away, and this kind of transitioned into this Facebook Local. So Facebook Local is a whole separate app, and so this is about a month ago, and we kind of missed it on our last show. So I wanted to bring it around here. But it said Facebook debuted Facebook Local, a refurbished version of its events app that aims to help people find nearby things to do and places to go and make Facebook a more player in the local search. It's available on iOS and Android. I downloaded it and played around. Kind of looks like Yelp's.
Yeah.
It's very similar to Yelp, except it's tied into the Facebook events. And so you can see, I was just going through, some of my friends are interested in going, there's a Santa, go take your pictures of Santa on Saturday. And so it's like, this is taking place here. There's a little map there, and so is interested in this. And so obviously Facebook's got all that data from people's Facebook profiles.
Right.
You tie it in. It's Yelp's in trouble, I think, with this Facebook Local. Looks pretty neat.
And we don't want to miss the countdown. That's actually correct on Facebook of how long it is before Christmas.
Yeah. One thing I did think was a little weird is the branding isn't really consistent with Facebook.
Right.
Everything was kind of white and pink.
White and pink.
Yeah, it wasn't really the Facebook blue that we're used to. But it's be interesting. We'll see.
We need more pink on the web. I'm going to
True.
go out there and say that.
I think we need some more black and golds, actually, but
more orange for my.
there it goes.
There you go.
See?
Yeah.
Now, pink's a good color in moderation. You know.
It'll be interesting to see how this competes with the Google Locals and the Yelps and
Yeah, I think it's
Foursquare and all that.
It was a play that was bound to happen, and they've been cooking this up for a while, and it should be putting everybody on notice. The local battlefront is where all marketing is looking to move towards, and we're seeing this across the board from the smartphone devices, the voice search to the local. Everything's being personalized, and these tools are going to be fantastic for those local professional and service-oriented organizations.
Yep.
Cool. Something that's personal and also service-oriented for you is signing up for our newsletter. It's a free of charge newsletter, of course, and you can get all the information that we talk about on the show, who we talked to, what were some aha moments from our last interview, some of the news articles that we shared, as well as who's going to be coming up on the show. So sign up to the number 22828 with the word Edge Talk, and you can get moved right along into our sign-up process, or simply go over to edgeofthewebradio.com and sign up for, honestly, it's a piece of digital gold each and every week.
Digital Bitcoin.
Digital Bitcoin. No, let's not talk about Bitcoin. Have you seen what's been happening on Bitcoins?
How can you not?
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, just... Yeah. Whatever.
Anyway,
That's not this show.
No, it's not. Follow all of our feature trending topics at edgeofthewebradio.com. So now let's deep dive with this week's featured guest.
Now it's time for Edge of the Web featured interview with Kim Scott, author of the book Radical Candor.
Okay, Kim, I'm just going to say before we get started, thank you. Thank you for writing this book. This is an awesome book, and it's been in my ear for pretty much the last 3 weeks on my commute. So you've actually been with me on my drive back and forth to work here, pestering the heck out of me to make sure that I'm approaching my team with Radical Candor. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. You can start by giving me some Radical Candor. I've been told that my voice is incredibly irritating, so I hope it's been a pleasant time.
Actually, okay. I'll be honest with you. It sounded a bit abrasive at first, but here's the deal. I'm dealing with it as I'm being instructed. You are literally instructing me on what I should be taking, what I should be looking at, and really kind of walking me through as a manager, walking me through all the different signposts of where I shouldn't be. So honestly, it's well suited for what the instruction is for an owner and a manager of an organization. How about that for a little bit of diplomacy? There we go.
That was good.
Fantastic. Well, Kim, to our listeners and our watchers, Kim Scott is a co-founder of Candor Inc. And author of the book Radical Candor, How to Be a Kickass Boss Without Losing Your Humanity. And there's the cover of the book right there for our audio listeners. Kim has been an advisor at Dropbox, Curbo, Twitter, and several other Silicon Valley companies, as well as a member of the faculty at Apple University. She also led the AdSense, YouTube, and DoubleClick online sales and operations over at Google. There's a storied history right there, Kim. You want to give us a bit of your own personal backstory?
Well, you forgot about the diamond cutting factory.
Well, I was going to get to that. Because that's where it all started, right?
And the pediatric clinic in Kosovo. Yeah, but I've been lucky. I've had a lot of cool opportunities.
Give us a bit of okay. I want to unpack that diamond mine, the diamond cutters, because that actually, as I understand it, is one of the cornerstones of the Radical Candor concept. And before we get there, just give us that experience that you had with them.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So I was right out of college. I had studied Slavic literature, and I had no idea about management or business or any of it. And I was given this assignment to hire these diamond cutters, the very best diamond cutters in Moscow. And I thought this was going to be easy because I had dollars and they were making rubles, and rubles were worth nothing and getting less and less and less of nothing all the time. So I thought, that's all there is to management, right? You pay people. And no, it turned out the diamond cutters wanted a picnic. They weren't going to just take the job. And after my very own bottle of vodka, we each got our own bottle of vodka. And once you open a bottle of vodka, you're not allowed to not finish it. So
yeah, exactly.
by the end of that bottle of vodka and some big ribs that we were eating and some tart apples, I realized that what they really wanted to know, these diamond cutters, was, would I get them out of Russia if everything went to hell there? Would I get them and their families out? And it occurred to me that the thing that I could do that the state could not do was not pay them. It was to give a damn at a very human level about each and every one of these people as individuals, as human beings, not just as employees. And that was the moment when I thought, oh, this management thing is kind of interesting. I can do that. So that was kind of the beginning of my interest in management.
But that management came with it an appreciation of cutting through the BS. and not doing what has been done before, because it causes problems. The stereotypical manager, unapproachable or too obnoxious. So you started to map out the behaviors of conventional managerial stereotypes, and you're kind of breaking through into an entire area of really new candor and new spaces in which you can teach a whole nother level of authenticity and a whole nother level of connection to one's employees and the people that they manage, right?
Absolutely. I'll tell you a story that sort of explains what I mean by radical candor in a pretty quick way, about a time when my boss criticized me. It was shortly after I had joined Google, and I had to give a presentation to Google's founders and the CEO. And I walked into the room, and there is Sergey on a treadmill in toe shoes. And there is Eric so deep in his computer, it's like his brain has been plugged in to the computer. And like any normal person in this situation, I felt a little bit nervous. How in the world was I supposed to get these people's attention? Happily, the AdSense business was on fire. And when I said how many new AdSense publishers we had added in the last month, Eric's head pops up out of his computer. He says, "What did you say? What do you need? How can I help? Do you need more marketing dollars? Do you need more engineers?" So I'm feeling like the meeting went pretty well. In fact, I'm kind of feeling like a genius. And as I left the meeting, I passed by my boss, who is Sheryl Sandberg, and I was expecting a pat on the back or a high five or something like that. And instead, Sheryl says to me, "Why don't you walk back to my office with me?" And I think, oh boy, I thought I did so well, but I screwed something up, and I'm sure I'm about to hear about it. And Sheryl started out by telling me the things that had gone well in the meeting, not in a feedback sandwich. There's another term for that. I don't know how you're cursing on your podcast, but not in a feedback sandwich kind of way, but actually genuinely telling me some good things that had happened. And of course, though, I wasn't really listening, because all I really wanted to hear about was what I had screwed up. And eventually Sheryl said, "You said a lot in there. Were you aware of it?" And now I breathed a huge sigh of relief, because I think if that's all I've done wrong, it doesn't really matter. And I make this kind of brush off gesture with my hand. I said, "Yeah, no, it's a verbal tick. It's no big deal, really." And then Sheryl said, "I know a really good speech coach. I bet Google would pay for it. Would you like an introduction?" And I make this brush off gesture again. I said, "I'm busy. Didn't you hear about all those new AdSense customers?" And she stopped. She looked right at me and she said, "When you say every third word, it makes you sound stupid." Now she has my full attention. And some people would say it was mean of Sheryl to say that I sounded stupid, but in fact, it was the kindest thing she could possibly have done for me at that moment in my career. And she wouldn't have said it that way to somebody else. So radical candor is sort of, it's not an absolute, it's relative depending on who you're talking to. She wouldn't have said that to the other people who work for her, but I'm maybe a little more stubborn than most. So that was what those were the words she had to use in order to get through to me. And if she hadn't said it to me just that way, I wouldn't have gone to see the speech coach and had one of life's painful experiences of watching myself on video and realizing that she was not exaggerating. I really did say every third word. And this was really surprising to me, because I had been giving presentations my whole career. I had raised millions of dollars for a startup giving presentations. I thought I was pretty good at it. And this got me to thinking, why had nobody told me? It was sort of like I've been going through my whole career with a hunk of spinach in my teeth, and nobody had to tell me. You know, I could have gotten it out if I knew it was there. And what was it about Sheryl that made it so seemingly easy for her to tell me? And I realized it really boils down to two things. The two dimensions of radical candor. The first is caring personally. Sheryl cared about each of the people who worked directly with her at a very human level. She cared about us not just as employees, but as human beings. But she didn't let her concern for our feelings get in the way of her willingness to challenge us really directly. So if we screwed up, we knew about it. And that was radical candor in a nutshell. Those two things. Now, it sounds really simple to be radically candid, but it's actually really, as we were talking before, it's really hard to be radically candid. And it's hard, I think, for two reasons. It's hard because along about the time we get our first job, we're 18, 19, 20 years old. We're right at that moment in our lives when our egos are extremely fragile, but our personas are beginning to solidify. And right at that moment, somebody comes along and says, be professional. And for an awful lot of us, that gets translated to mean leave your feelings, leave your true identity, leave your humanity, leave everything that's best of you at home and come to work like some kind of robot. And you can't care personally if you're a robot. You have to be a fully fledged human being. So you've got to learn how to be more than just professional, to bring your whole self to work. So that's sort of why it's difficult on the care personally dimension. And then the challenge directly dimension is what I think of as the willing to piss people off dimension of radical candor. Unfortunately, love is not all you need. You also need this other thing. And Colin Powell said that leadership often is about being willing to piss people off. And so that unwillingness is much more deep-seated even than the professional thing. I think that begins when we're 18 months old. We're just learning to talk. And we have a parent or a caregiver who says some version of, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. And now it's your job to say it. Congratulations. And that's hard. It's hard to undo training that's been pounded into your head since you learned to speak. So that's kind of why radical candor is important but hard.
So that's and thank you for that introduction, because those are the building blocks in which radical candor can be executed. The caring personally access and the challenge directly access, and inside of this these axes are quadrants in which you can fall. And for the audio listeners, I want to go through around the horn on the quadrants, and we certainly we're going to throw up the quadrants on the screen here.
Right.
But the upper left is ruinous empathy. If you care too much and you don't challenge nearly enough, you have ruinous empathy, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Upper right hand side is where you want to be from a radical candor standpoint. You care personally, but you also challenge. Lower left is the lack of caring personally, and the lack of challenging directly is manipulative insincerity. And the lower right, where you challenge too much but you don't give a damn, it's obnoxious aggression. So it makes perfect sense. It's a simple diagram, but boy, the layers that are inside of each of every one of those quadrants, and the experiences managers have as well as employees have. Anybody who's ever had a professional career can go in through their entire history and pinpoint where their managers were, as well as where they were in responsibility to communicate to other colleagues, right?
Yeah, and I think a really important point here is that the best way to use this framework is to think about where you are in any given conversation. I used to call the obnoxious aggression quadrant the asshole quadrant. And I stopped doing that for a very important reason, because people would start writing names in boxes. And I beg of you, don't use this that way. This is not some kind of Myers-Briggs personality test. We all land in all these quadrants all the time. And so the way to think about this framework is it's like a compass that will help you guide your conversations into a safer place, into a better place, a healthier place, rather than using these terms as labels to hang around people's neck or ways to self-flagellate and label yourself. Although I will say that most of us make the vast majority of our mistakes in the ruinous empathy quadrant, in part because we so fear being called a jerk, being called obnoxiously aggressive, or so fear looking political
Right.
or backstabbing as the 2x2 indicates.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's
manipulative.
just I just fear conflict,
Yeah.
and just not avoiding that any way possible. Is I always tend up to be in this ruinous empathy whenever it becomes a conversation like that.
Mm-hmm. It's very easy, and it's a safe harbor. And in a lot of ways, and as we were talking before the show, Kim, is that like I said, this has been a awakening moment for me. Just reading the book and listening to you, and again having you in the next seat over as I'm driving to work. I mean, literally, it's painting a picture of not only what I need to do from my own management style, but also understanding that it is you have a compass, but you also, it's not just you. You have to read the person and be able to see whether or not they're receptive to certain types of candor, right? I mean, the fact of the matter is that there's trust that has to be built, and your book's about paving a way to be able to have this type of candor and have each other's back in the workforce. It's not just you just can't put radical candor in the middle. I mean, you can drop it like a rock in the middle of the pool, and you're gonna have a ripple effect everywhere. But you can use it deftly in support of relationships in the workplace, right?
Yeah, I think you raise a really important point, that radical candor gets measured not at your mouth, but at the other person's ear.
Right.
And so, especially when you don't know the other person very well, it can be hard to know what's going on at their ear. You don't know how to read their body language. You don't know how to read the signs. On the other hand, even though it feels safer, one of the big mistakes that people frequently make with radical candors, they think the thing to do is to hang out in ruinous empathy for a while and build the relationship there and then move over. But the fact of the matter is that the seeds of trust get sown in radical candor. I mean, just think about a simple example, not such an emotionally charged example, but the spinach in your teeth example. If you don't know somebody at all and you're having the very first meeting with them, and they've got a giant hunk of spinach in their teeth, if you don't tell them, they're going to go to the bathroom, see it, and wonder why you didn't tell them and be a little bit more embarrassed. Whereas if you pull them aside and say, look, happens to me all the time. I always appreciate it when people tell me you got a giant hunk of spinach between your teeth. Then you actually begin to sow the seeds of trust. In fact, for me, sometimes I get these questions like, how long do these radical candor therapy sessions have to take? And the answer is 2 minutes, a minute, 2 minutes. The best feedback I've ever gotten in my career has always happened, just like Cheryl did it, in this 2-minute conversation in the moment. And for me, in fact, the origin story of radical candor really came in the space of time it took a light to change on the street in Manhattan. I had this puppy, this golden retriever puppy, and I adored this dog. And because I loved the dog so much, I never said a crossword to the dog, and she was totally out of control. And so I'm walking along, she jumps in front of a cab. I pull her out of the way just in time. And this man, perfect stranger, looks at me and he says, I can see you really love that dog. That's all he has to do to move up on the care personally dimension of radical candor. He doesn't have to know my kids' names or my birthday or take me out for lunch or any of that stuff. I can see you really love that dog. But then he says to me, but you're going to kill that dog if you don't teach her to sit. And now he's got my full attention. And then he kind of points at the ground in this harsh gesture and he says, sit. The dog sat. I had no idea the dog even knew what that meant. And I kind of looked up at him in amazement and he said, it's not mean, it's clear. And then the light changed and he walked off, leaving me with words to live by. It's not mean, it's clear. And so that didn't take long, that whole exchange, and it changed my whole life. So unfortunately, I didn't develop a relationship with him. I never saw him again. But you can, even when you don't know someone well, you can begin to really help them and build a relationship by being radically candid.
Absolutely. And I'm just grinning from ear to ear because that story was in the book as well. And these are these non complex moments where As long as you're listening to it with clarity, you can start climbing yourself out of those different behavior areas, and get into a space where you can build trust. You can actually be clear about your management and goals for an organization, and I mean, the space in which every employer and manager and professional working with colleagues wants to go, gravitate to, is a space in which trust is the fabric, and the bedrock for how you do business. And how to get there is be able to read people, understand where their resistance may be, and be able to use that compass to be able to find that relationship. And you bring into the equation in the book, literally looking at and knowing how to reach each and every person on your team, and they all have their different barometer, their different equalizer when it comes down to what they're receptive to, and it's a lifespan, it's a life cycle, basically. What they can't respond to right now, you can certainly work towards that, but you have to be cognizant of every individual's feedback, right?
Yes, yeah, and so you need to be able to gauge your radical candor, how it's landing for the other person. And I think one of the things that happens most often, and frankly, not just at work, I've gotten notes from a lot of readers. If only I had read this book 5 years ago, I wouldn't be divorced. So it applies to other relationships as well. But the thing that happens most often is we do care. Most people are pretty nice, sensitive people, and they do care. They want to be kind. And so you say something so gently that the other person doesn't hear it. And most people wouldn't do what Cheryl did, which was when she saw me making these brush off gestures, she went a little further out on the challenge directly dimension of radical candor. And she had to take a couple of steps out on that before she got through to me. And I think that's what people are often unwilling to do. I mean, there are other times when you're talking to somebody and they will get emotional. I don't, unfortunately, have emotional Novocaine to offer. Like when, especially if you're criticizing somebody, sometimes they're gonna cry, sometimes they're gonna yell at you, sometimes they're gonna get defensive, sometimes they're gonna shut down. You will often get an emotional reaction. And the thing to do then is not to keep going out on the challenge directly dimension, but to try to move up a little bit on the care personally dimension. And I'm not talking about baking cupcakes for the whole office or a lot of touchy-feely stuff. It's just a quick, I can see I've upset you. Mm-hmm. And don't move the wrong direction on the challenge directly dimension. Don't say, I'm sorry I said it, because you're not sorry you said it. You said it because it needed to be said, but I'm sorry I've upset you.
And you can certainly get into mixed signals. Yeah, you can get into mixed signals if you vacillate too much on the challenge directly. To get into some deeper dives on the concept of radical candor, because there's certainly a lot of examples, and we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want our audience to jump into this book and download the audiobook as well, because it's great for consumption for people that can't crack a book. But can I ask, when you release this, and it's certainly being adopted in organizations, and you're getting consulting engagements as well as speaking engagements to be able to speak to this, how has radical candor been adopted in the professional environments? Have you seen a wake of new businesses clamoring to adopt this type of behavior?
It's been really fun, actually, working. We've probably worked with hundreds, probably 300 different companies have worked with candor coaches or just rolled out. Some of them just will buy a copy of the book for every manager and do a book group. And I'll jump in occasionally and take some questions. But the thing that is, and it's a broad variety of companies. Obviously, there were a lot of tech companies early on that adopted it, but a giant, heavy industry $24 billion company in Ohio, when they got a new CEO, he decided that Radical Candor was really the change he was going to drive and was going to be sort of his legacy on the company. And working with a number of real estate companies, all kinds of different companies, entertainment companies. It's been a lot of fun watching it. It's Radical Candor. I even worked with one guy who managed in Memphis some warehouses and the workers in the warehouses. So it's everybody, every single person has dreams. They can do a job better. They can do a job worse. The vast majority of people are good people, and the vast majority of people want to do a good job. And so the good news is that if you can overcome the reluctance to be radically candid, if you can find the emotional discipline, rolling this out is fast. It's, again, I'm not talking about some heavy duty process. I'm talking about teaching people to have routine, regular 2-minute impromptu conversations. And it's free. I mean, the book, you can check it out in the library if you can't afford to buy it. Although buy it if you can afford to, please. But it's fast. It's for a lot of emotional discipline. So what we've done when we've worked with companies is we've worked with management teams to begin by soliciting radical candor. Don't dish it out till you prove you can take it. Mm-hmm. You can lead by example. You can prove that you think of feedback as a gift by spending some energy. Again, not huge amounts of time, but some emotional energy, because it's hard to hear the feedback. It's hard to solicit feedback, especially when you're the boss and you kind of feel like you should be getting it all right. You're not going to get it all right. And so we work with people and we sort of try to break it down. Like, come up with your go-to question. If you say, do you have any feedback for me? You're wasting your breath, because I can already tell you what the answer is. No, nobody wants to give you feedback, especially if you're the boss. And so you got to come up with a way of asking that sounds authentic. The question that I used to like to use is there anything I could do or stop doing that would make it easier to work with me? But I was working with Krista Quarles, who's the CEO of OpenTable, and she said, I could never imagine those words coming out of my mouth. The thing that I like to ask is, tell me why I'm smoking crack. So there's a lot of different ways to ask the question. You got to find the words that feel right for you, but you got to ask the question. And then you just got to sit down and shut your mouth. 6 seconds. You'll be astounded how uncomfortable 6 seconds of silence is, but you've really got to embrace the discomfort in order to get people to tell you anything. And then you've got to manage your natural defensiveness, right? You got to listen with the intent to understand, and you've got to make that listening tangible. You got to come up with ways to make listening tangible. And then, of course, you've got to reward the candor. So if you agree with the feedback, fix the problem. If you disagree with the feedback, you got to figure out how to explain why in a way that is respectful and not defensive.
There it is.
So we'll work with people just on those 4 skills over the course of a month and really get them to be great at soliciting feedback. And then we'll talk about praise next, right? The next step is to focus on the good stuff. And so what you want to do is not offer the feedback sandwich that I talked about before, but you want to realize that praise and criticism are 2 sides of the same coin. They should both show that you do care, but they should also both challenge people to do more, better work. And so that is often hard. A lot of times people think of praise as the way that you show you care, and criticism is the way that you challenge. So we really work on the mindset that you need to adopt in order to have successfully these good 2-minute impromptu feedback conversations where you're giving feedback. And then we'll also work on learning how to gauge how it's landing, because we talked about that before, but that's hard. It's hard to know. It's hard to read other people. It's hard to be self-aware. It's even harder to be relationally aware. So we'll work on those skills. And then last but not least, we've got some processes that you can roll out, sort of a speak truth to power process and a clean escalation process. That if you're the leader of a big team, you can use those things to encourage people to be radically candid with one another. Because if the whole burden of feedback falls on your shoulders as the manager, you'll get crushed. You've got to create a team in which everybody's radically candid.
Absolutely. And that's a great outline of how you're deploying that in organizations. We wanted to give a shout out to a local organization, Lessonly. Max Yoder wanted to say, give you a heads up because he has been a fan and evangelist of your book as soon as it came out. So we'll just throw that one out there just for our friend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
And that's where we first heard of the book. Was he was giving a presentation about it locally. So.
Yep.
Wow. Well, I owe him. I'll send him some signed copies. Thank you. Tell him.
Wait. He gets signed copies. I get a sticker. Is that what you're saying? Wow.
Yeah. I'll send you a signed copy too.
See.
Sign it right now.
So what we want to do is also solicit some comments and questions from our Facebook audience as we're going through the show here. One of our audience members that unfortunately is a employee of ours. Not unfortunately. Wait. Fortunately, but I'll buy her a book anyway. But she can't get into the drawing. She said, "This is Brittany Simpson." She says, "Kim, any tips for male-female workplace interactions? Our conversation and confrontation styles can be vastly different from one another. Is there some sort of middle ground?"
Yes. So it's a great question, and in fact, it's the topic of my next book. Is gender and radical candor, and how to help. But couldn't be more topical nowadays, right? Thank you. A great question. I get to announce. I don't even know if it's announced. I hope I didn't just get in trouble.
We just did it. Tweet now.
It's now announced. So anyway, a couple of quick points. One is that very often men who are bosses of women tend to pull their punches when giving feedback to women more than to their male peers. Not because they're misogynist jerks or anything like that, but because they've been taught since they were kids to be gentler with women. And so what I tell these guys is to man up, like she can take it. And so you're really hurting your employees if you're not giving everybody equally radically candid criticism. And then I also would say to women that you've got to really drag it out of your male bosses. You've got to really work hard to solicit radical candor from your male bosses. And I also give people tips. I think very often men are, in particular, like I once worked for this guy who said to me when I first started working for him, you can't cry. You can't cry in front of me. I'm terribly afraid of tears. And that was the worst thing he could possibly have said to me. Like I would just see the guy walking down the hall and I'd see myself tear up. Like as soon as you tell someone they can't, and I'm not like a huge crier. I'm kind of a crier, but so as soon as you tell somebody they can't have an emotional reaction, but you're gonna ensure that they do. It's like telling somebody, "Don't be sad," like that Meatloaf song. You know, every time I hear that song, I feel really sad. So don't do that. I give some tips for managing your own emotion. One of the things that happens is sometimes our emotions are like the Verrazano State Bridge. You know. And they'll rip us apart because I have an emotion about my emotions get out of control. So like some simple things: bring a bottle of water to a conversation, and sometimes if you just hand somebody the bottle of water and give them a moment to unscrew the top, make sure it has the top on. Just give them a moment; they can regain composure because they don't want to get upset. The other thing I tell guys is that men cry too. Like, I don't know, maybe this says something about me, but you cry. I promise you cry. You lie. Not only do you cry, you lie.
Oh boy. She's pinning me down now.
There's some radical candor, maybe descending into obnoxious.
You're not really caring.
Yeah, I'm not showing on it. But I care about, but if you cried, you'd see.
You're getting me there. You're getting me there.
But at least in my experience, the guys who worked for me cried just as often in my office as the women. I mean, not that everybody was crying.
Wow, yeah, exactly. What's going on over there?
Yeah. but you're going to get tears. If you're a boss, you're going to get some tears. That's just part of the job. So that's what I say to the male boss of a female employee. What I say to women who are, especially women who are in leadership positions, when you're radically candid, you're going to get unjustly accused of being obnoxiously aggressive. But people aren't going to say you're obnoxiously aggressive. They're going to call you the B word. And I don't have data on this, but that's more painful than getting called an asshole. And so it's very tempting as a woman to back off your challenge when this happens, when you get called abrasive or shrill or whatever these gendered words are for an aggressive woman. And often you're just doing the things you have to do to get the job done. A guy doing the exact same thing would be called, a go-getter. And so it's very tempting when this happens because it's painful to back off your challenge. But that's going to land you in an even worse spot than obnoxious aggression. Obnoxious aggression is really bad, but ruinous sympathy and manipulative insincerity are even worse. So don't back off your challenge. Do take a couple of minutes to move up on the care personally dimension. I'm not talking about being what Virginia Woolf called the angel in the house. You don't have to bake cupcakes for the whole office, do all the emotional labor. But take a minute to say, look, I'm telling you this thing because I care about you and I want to help, or whatever it is. And that, I think, will help. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And I'll care a little bit more right now and say apologies to Brittany. I was saying, unfortunately, because she couldn't get into the drawing for the book that we're going to give away. Yeah, whatever. So I wanted to ask you something. I've got a lot more questions, and I want to be respectful of your time. One key thing that I came across and kind of pulled from your book here is battling the self-image, and a couple of stories that you had about Steve Jobs. He was a bulldog in that space, but it was this concept of unsatisfactory work and comments and candor about unsatisfactory work equal to people perceiving that they are unsatisfactory people. There's such a connection to self-image and work product. How do you navigate that briar patch whenever you're giving feedback on somebody's work and have it not just crush somebody because they can't separate the difference?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is eliminate the words, don't take it personally, from your vocabulary.
Yeah.
Of course we take it personally. Like, we spend more time at work than in any other aspect of our lives. And when we screw up and somebody tells us we've screwed up, it can feel like a gut punch. And that's okay. It just means we care. So if somebody gets really upset when you've given them some feedback, don't take it personally. Say, look, you can fix this. One of the things that Steve Jobs said in this Lost interview, he said, when you're the boss, it's your job to tell people in a way that leaves no room for ambiguity when their work isn't nearly good enough, but also to reassure them that you have confidence in their abilities if you do. And that's a hard thing to do, he says. And it is a hard thing to do. I think one of the techniques that's out there that can really help is to use situation, behavior, impact. When Cheryl told me that I sounded stupid when I said every third word, she said sort of situation in the meeting, behavior, when you said every third word, it made you sound stupid, impact. There's a world of difference between that and saying, Kim, you're stupid.
Right.
So using some sort of simple techniques like that just to check yourself.
Pull them out and actually observe the situation as opposed to being assaulted by the comment. Yeah.
I think it's also really important, for the same reason you wouldn't say to somebody, you're a moron. Don't say to somebody, you're a genius. Both praise and criticism should not be about personality, because it's really difficult to change our personality. They should be as specific as possible about behaviors or action or work product that we can change. And that's what creates the kind of praise that helps people know what to do more of, and the kind of criticism that helps people know what to fix.
Another point in your book, quickly, and thank you for that. That's a great perspective on how to help break apart that self-image to work product. Another point you make is don't praise without sincerity. I mean, and this has a lot to do with candor. Is that the signals that you're sending, especially whenever you're trying to send some good, honest feedback, and then you praise in such a non-sincere place. You're developing such a unpredictable set of signals that the receiving employee or individual just can't navigate, can't understand where you're coming from because it's not consistent, right?
Yes. There's a bunch to unpack there. The first thing is what one bit of advice from Karen Supprell, who I worked with at Apple, was she would ask this question of people: how much time do you spend getting your facts right when you are planning to criticize somebody? And people would throw out some number, 10 minutes, 10 hours, depending on what the situation was. And then she would ask, and how much time do you spend preparing to praise? And the answer was invariably 0.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, you can get praise just as wrong as you can get criticism. So it's really important to use the same rigor and discipline with praise as you do with criticism. And that will help if you really have the facts straight, the sincerity will flow naturally. And I think another thing to keep in mind is that very often we want to use these ratios. We want to say, well, you got to give 3 times as much praise as criticism, 5 times as much praise as criticism, 7 times as much praise as criticism, some people say. And the problem with that is you'll wind up saying, I love your headset. I hate your podcast, which I don't. I love it, by the way. Great computer, like that doesn't, commenting on your nice computer and headset don't really help.
They don't match. Yeah.
So that's one problem with the sort of do it by a ratio or feedback sandwich, is that you wind up saying things you don't mean when you praise. Another problem is that you're not adjusting the feedback for the person. So, for example, if you're going to give me some criticism and you give me praise at the same time, I'm only going to hear the praise because I'm kind of apt to think well of myself. And meanwhile, if you're managing my sister and you give her praise and criticism at the same time, she's only going to hear the criticism. And so that's one of the reasons why I say don't save up feedback for a one-on-one. Definitely don't save it up for a performance review, but give it in these discrete 2-minute conversations where you can focus on a thing, one thing at a time, and try to focus on the good stuff as well as the bad stuff. But don't, if you don't mean it, don't say it.
Absolutely. I want to dive into a couple quick examples in a dichotomy almost of your 2 experiences with 2 large organizations. One, it was the example in the book from Google. Whenever you're working with Google and you were talking about the exchange between Matt Cutts and Larry Page. And I'd like to also compare it to your experience at Apple and your experience with Sergey and what they're doing to empower people to challenge themselves. So there's a setting right there.
Great. So one of the things that really struck me shortly after I joined Google was, first of all, how respectful people were of each other, but secondly, how they really didn't pull their punches. And so shortly after I joined, Matt and I had a disagreement with Larry Page. And so Matt and I talked about what we thought, and then we went to meet with Larry about this AdSense policy. And Matt felt very vehemently, and he started getting quite sort of loud and maybe even cursing a little bit, which isn't his MO. He's kind of a mellow, calm guy, but he was really strong in his language. I don't remember exactly but he's very strong in his language with Larry. And I remember thinking, I just got to know this guy. I really like him. I'm afraid he's going to get fired or something. And then I looked at Larry's face, and he had this big grin. And the louder and angrier Matt got, the happier Larry seemed to be. And I realized that he really wanted the challenge and was encouraging the challenge, and that he and Matt had a good relationship because they could really challenge each other in this very, very clear way. And and then Larry gave as good as he got, but not in a way that made Matt feel like he shouldn't have said what he said. And it was kind of inspiring. It was just like a little 10-minute exchange, but it made me really happy to be at Google.
So, and that was great to be able to see, read about that experience. Now over at Apple, there's an entire different culture over there, and there's numerous examples that you gave in Apple. One of them, actually, one of them was regarding Steve Jobs and how he was known to just blow through people, right?
Yeah. So I think I would say that Google is radically candid with maybe a twist of ruinous empathy. And Apple is also radically candid, but maybe a twist of obnoxious aggression. And so here was one of my favorite examples. This actually, I didn't see this. This came from this Revenge of the Nerds video, but which you can watch. It's worth watching. It was the outtakes from it, the lost interview, actually. And the interviewer says to Steve, am I allowed to say curse words?
Go right ahead.
Okay. So he says to Steve, I hear you sometimes say to people your work is shit. What do you mean by that? And Steve kind of laughs and he's like, what do you think I mean by that? It's pretty clear. And then the interviewer can't quite believe Steve isn't apologizing or something. And he says, well, so-and-so says what you really meant is, could you please explain it? And Steve kind of chuckles. He's like, no, that is not what I meant. Usually what I meant is your work is shit. And then he kind of sits back and he says, it's your job. It's your job as a manager to get through to people. And when you're working with people who are supremely confident and pretty sure their work is fabulous, it can be quite difficult to convince them that their work isn't nearly good enough. But it's your job to do that. It's your job to do that, but also to reassure them that you have confidence in their abilities. And that's what helps people to do the very best work of their lives. Steve Jobs also would compare debate on a team to a rock tumbler. And he said there's a lot of noise, a lot of friction, but these beautiful polished stones come out because of this rock tumbler experience.
Or they're just beaten into submission.
Well, so here's the deal.
Yep.
Here's the deal. With Steve and his direct reports, I mean, I might not have relished working for Steve Jobs, but with his direct reports, there was a real Tim Cook offered Steve his liver. Like, I don't, and Steve refused to accept. I don't know how you explain that other than love.
Right.
There's only one word to explain that. And so that's about as high as you can get on the care personally dimension.
Absolutely.
And so there was that too. When you saw Steve and Johnny having lunch, like, it was clear that these two people really did care about each other. So I think there was another side to that whole story. Often when two people have a particular kind of relationship and you're observing it, it looks so harsh to you, but you don't understand what it's like. I was raised in the South, and so we always had these very polite, non-combative dinner table conversations. And then I'll never forget when I was working in Israel, my first, and invited to a family dinner. I was like, holy cow, these people must hate each other, but they didn't. They loved each other. It was just different way
cultures,
of interacting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, to kind of wrap up, and these are all great examples, and there's so much more in the book. And again, I want to say thank you for writing it, because it absolutely needs to be embraced by today's managers. I'm wondering whether or not managers and owner perspectives have really changed in the last 10 years for this book to be so written. Could this have been adopted and embraced a decade ago, 20 years ago? I don't know, but it is a valuable perspective in how relationships work inside of management. So I highly recommend it. I do want to be a bit honest and transparent with you as well as my team. Just how personally I took this. I've been a practitioner of ruinous empathy, and I just wanted to give a couple key points. I mean, it is about avoiding creating tension or discomfort. That's where you go, not with an intention to cause this, but honestly to try to create what you think is harmony. You're actually doing employees that work with you a disservice. And you mentioned this in the book. You're actually ruining the employee's chances for success without having candor and giving feedback when it's needed to be able to adjust course, as well as in certain scenarios. And my team knows this from this year. There's been a number of individuals I've had to release because it wasn't working for us, and there was not a scenario in which we would have been able to course correct, and that was an enlightening moment to me. Is that I hadn't been, for 13 years running this company, I hadn't been in a space where I could provide this level of candor, and this year has been a true codifying experience. And with the book, it's almost like you slapped me in the face with the book, to be honest with you, because it just dawned on me exactly where I've been in my management. So this is a good deal of therapy right now, everybody, just to let you know. But I mean,
thank you. That really it makes the 4 long, lonely years I spent writing the book worthwhile, because I made the same mistake. I failed to give somebody feedback, and then I had to fire him. And it was probably worse for him than it was for me, but it was one of the worst moments of my career, because I felt so guilty that I hadn't told him sooner in time to fix it.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You see it happen all the time. It's the most common management mistake.
It is, and I implore any managers that listen to the podcast to check themselves, because you're doing your employees a disservice, and that your job is to help them excel in their career, even if it's not with you. Yes. And a lot of employers don't understand that's part of what they're responsible for. So I just want to thank you for the book, and we certainly would love to have future conversations, especially with the next book that's going to be the gender roles in a candid space. That'd be.
We might not have the permission to announce that.
Of course. I didn't announce that again, did I? To wrap up, Kim, we really enjoyed the conversation today. What bugs you about your industry right now?
What really bothers me is how reluctant people are to both say what they really think, but also show each other that they care. I think we're often retreating into silence and anger instead of radical candor. And so I hope that we can move past both of those things.
No, yeah, you're absolutely correct. So conversely, what excites you about your industry right now as well?
I think for a long time, people used to say that in Silicon Valley, management is neither taught nor valued. And I think that's really beginning to change. And I think that's going to make everyone much happier, because bad bosses are one of the leading sources of misery in the world. And it doesn't have to be that bad. Usually the bad bosses are not bad people. They just don't know how to be good bosses.
There it is.
And so I hope that changes.
Absolutely. Well, we certainly want to promote your book for you, Radical Candor. And again, for all of our listener and live cast audience, we are going to keep the week open until this time next Thursday, to pull one of the comments out from the Facebook comment of questions that they would like to have asked Kim, and you're more than welcome to respond post-show.
I will do it.
Absolutely, and we'll certainly give away one of Kim's books, and I won't give away the one that I have the sticker with. That's my sticker, and you don't get it. So we certainly want to lift up Kim on social. Check her out on Twitter at Kimball Scott. Kimball Scott. On Facebook, Kimmel1 Scott. And on LinkedIn, Kim4. No Instagram. It's okay. Not everybody has an Instagram.
I'm too old.
Me too. I get reprimanded that my Instagram's not up to date by my teens. Any final words for the listeners of the show, and especially managers and employees that are getting an insight into how their professional life could actually be?
I think if you feel that your problem is more often than not ruinous empathy, just say it. That's the best feedback advice I can give you. Just say it. Mm-hmm. You can course correct. You're a good person. You're a kind person. Just say it. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to go much better than you think.
Absolutely. All right. Got to get yourself out of your ruinous empathy. If you're there, trust me, it's not a good place to be. Well, thank you so much for your time, extended time. I appreciate it greatly, Kim. Thanks for listening to Edge of the Web Radio. A special thank you to all the colleagues at Site Strategics, as well of course, our guest, Kim Scott. To be sure to check out all the must-see videos and much more of the insider information over at edgeofthewebradio.com. That's edgeoftheradio.com. Tom, do we have anybody coming on next week?
Next week, no, we're off until after Christmas.
That's
so
right.
We want to say Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays, Merry Christmas to everybody, all of our listeners. We're going to kick off the new year with Dwayne Forrester, former head of Webmaster Tools at Bing. He's now at Yext.
Yeah.
So we're going to kick off New Year's to talk about voice search.
Fantastic. So to all of our audience of Edge of the Web, have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday, and spend some great quality time with your family. Pick us up on the other side of the year, and we wish you all the best and a safe holiday to our listeners. And that's it for a wrap of 2018. We'll talk to you 2017. Well, I just time traveled.
We're done with
2017, and we'll check you back in 2018. Happy New Year, too.